So I'm going to begin by introducing our opening speaker, Ann Dickinson, truly an icon and water industry treasure. She has over 50 years of experience working for water utilities such as the Metropolitan Water District in Southern California, the Regional Water Authority in Connecticut, and the EPA. She was the founder, president, and CEO of the Alliance for Water Efficiency, America's leading steward of sustainable water use, until retiring last year. She's currently the co-chair of the Water and Planning Network for the American Planning Association, and she serves on Inpipe Energy's board of directors. She's going to describe how climate change is being addressed and how it's affecting water levels, then offer data from pilot projects around water and energy savings and its connection to the need for non-revenue water loss control. While these look unconnected, they are not. This data proves that curbing leakage and managing pressure can save energy as well as be a carbon reduction winner. So I'm really thrilled to welcome Ann.
Thank you, Greg, very much. And it's a pleasure to be here. I'm going to share my screen and hopefully this works. So as Greg mentioned, I'm going to give you a little bit of my perspective on how climate change, non-revenue water, and energy all connect to each other. And I first want to give you a disclaimer. I'm a generalist planner. I'm not a climate scientist. I spent 18 years in state government as an environmental regulator and then 20 years in the water utility world, where I was a very proud employee with the mantras of duty to serve and silent, dependable provider and highest quality, water quality for our customers. Those were the most prevalent themes for us in the water utility world, still are. But increasingly, we're getting bombarded with new crises and new issues: water affordability, climate change, the need for greater water resource stewardship and source water protection. These are now forefront issues for water utilities all around the world. And so reducing the carbon footprint now for water utilities is now a priority for a lot of them. And what I want to do is just start into the climate change discussion by showing you a very fun image. If you have not seen this video, don'tchooseextinction.com. This is something the UN put out just shortly before the COP26 meeting. It's a hysterically funny and very sobering video all at the same time. And it's a talking dinosaur. You got to watch it. But it was one way to get everyone's attention, certainly among the general public as well. So I encourage you to take a look at it. Now, let's just launch into just a few frightening facts that I think relate to the whole issue of climate change and the water utility world. Based on the current rates that we're experiencing, global temperatures could rise by up to 4.4 degrees Celsius by the end of the century. While that doesn't sound like a lot, it actually will have a serious impact. The Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change, the IPCC, has issued reports over the years, and they are urging that we limit the rise to only 1.5 degrees. We're now at 1.1 degrees at this time. So we really can't increase by much more. At 3 degrees increase, 1 in 100-year events will happen every 2 to 3 years. So the massive floods we're experiencing are going to be much more prevalent. The severe droughts would be much more prevalent. And worse, 2/3 of humanity will experience drier conditions as the planet warms, because most of the population happens to be in those areas that are fraught with drought. And so it's sobering, because the differences between a 2-degree increase and a 3-degree increase, those differences are far starker than those between the 1.5 degrees and 2 degrees. So if we don't do anything, we are headed for a much more different planet. So lots of people have been thinking about this. Bill Gates wrote a book that he published late last year. And, his basic message in the book was, we're at 51 billion tons of greenhouse gases that we emit to the atmosphere every year in the world. And we need to get to zero. And that's going to be a sobering assignment. And to meet that zero emission goal, we'd have to cut our own greenhouse gas emissions in half. And so we make some recommendations in the book. I think it's a great read, and I highly recommend it. You know, we need to change how our cities are growing, you know, do better infrastructure construction. We need to shore up our national defenses. You know, utilities can save money in that regard as well. And most importantly, we need to connect the dots with the water supply. We need to better manage and improve our drinking water supplies nationally and across the world. So as you all know, there was an international meeting called COP26 in Glasgow in November of 2021. And 23 countries made a formal pledge to stop direct public financing for coal, oil, and gas by 2022, by the end of 2022, and to shift their investment instead to renewable energy. You know, these were very important commitments that were made. Banks, insurers, and investors also pledged to make green investing a priority for them and to center climate change solutions in their work. So those were important commitments as well. 100 countries committed to end deforestation by 2030. And while that all sounds good, there was a sobering report issued by the IPCC on February 28th of this year that further documented that we need to do a better job of adapting to the climate change that's happening. That's just as important, perhaps even more so, than mitigation and prevention of those emissions. We need to better adapt to what we are now experiencing worldwide. So I live in California. California is probably ground zero now for a lot of the drought issues. We're in a third year of deep drought. Now that's after we had a drought already between 2012 and 2016 that was the worst drought in 1,200 years. And now we're back in another drought that is looking to be worse. We've had no rain during the rainy months of January and February. As people probably know in the West, you know, it rains in January and February and March, and it doesn't rain for the rest of the year. We've had zero rain in January and February. So water deliveries are at 5% of people's water rights. State board just issued a notice to water right holders saying you might be reduced even further. Lake Oroville shut down its hydroelectric plant for the first time ever because of low flows in the reservoir, not being able to operate the plant. And we're facing a situation where scientists are telling us that the snowpack is decreasing so much that the Sierras may no longer really have snow by 2040. And if you're in the water business, you know that that's how California gets its water supply, is from the Sierra snowpack. So this is serious news. And it's true for all throughout the West and the Colorado River system. There's a mega drought in the West as well. The Department of Interior declared for the first time ever on August 16th, a shortage on the Colorado River. There are 500,000 acre feet needs to be saved every year if we're to keep the downward trend of Lake Mead from ending up in a dead pool. And as of August of last year, 99% of the United States west of the Rockies was found to be in drought. And that's as severe a measurement as any in historical record. We are experiencing conditions that are not just the normal drought cycles. They are now becoming a much more sobering situation. Here's the U.S. Drought Monitor, which is a wonderful tool that's made available by the University of Nebraska. And you can see the drought that's intensifying around the United States. The darker the color, the more exceptional and intensive the drought is. But there's even drought in states like New England and Michigan and Wisconsin. These are not states that have typically experienced these kinds of droughts before. So we're seeing some real changes in the way drought is appearing, and water utilities and water suppliers are needing to deal with it. And that's kind of the big issue. We need to make sure water and climate change are dealt with as a combined effect, because water's like the canary in the coal mine for climate change. The effects are going to be felt both in water shortages as well as in excessive flooding in areas that are going to be wetter. Areas will be dry and will be drier, but there will be areas that will be wetter and will continue to flood in a more serious way. So these are dots that have to be connected. So what does this all have to do with non-revenue water? And so the good news that we want to talk to you about is managing pressures in your system, And reducing leakage saves water, but managing pressures and reducing leakage also saves energy. And that's what we want to talk about. Because when you save energy, you're saving greenhouse gas emissions, you're saving carbon, and you can count the carbon that you're saving. So here's again, and I'm sorry to be very California intensive, but I have access to a lot of data from them, so it makes a good story here. But the state of California took a look, the California Energy Commission took a look at how much of their water supply and treatment and delivery to customers was energy intensive. And so they figured out what the electricity use was that was associated with water in California, as well as the natural gas use. And the numbers were really pretty staggering. I mean, 32% of California's electric energy use natural gas use is related to the consumer use heating of hot water. 19% of California's electric power production was related to the pumping, treatment, and also consumer end use of water. Those are big numbers. So when you save water at the consumer end and you avoid it having to be treated and pumped to that consumer, as well as heated at the consumer, you're saving, a fair amount of energy. And so there's a center at the University of California at Davis, the Center for Water and Energy Efficiency, who's done fabulous work in taking a look at what kinds of savings are possible. And I'm going to walk you through this chart very quickly. On the far left-hand side, the colored bar chart shows the electric energy utility investment portfolio for energy efficiency. And what it shows you is what those energy utilities have saved in terms of gigawatt hours for the roughly $1 billion a year of investment that the California state government allows for energy efficiency portfolios. And the second bar in the middle shows you what the investor-owned electric utilities have saved in terms of water conservation, what that energy results in. But the bar on the far right is the electricity that's saved by the water utilities, who have basically through their water conservation programs, saved electricity and greenhouse gas emissions through programs that were not reimbursed through the energy efficiency portfolios, but were actually just funded by water utility ratepayers. And you can see they've saved more gigawatt hours than the energy utilities did. So while California may be an outlier in terms of the intensity of energy in its water supply, it certainly documents well that those savings can occur. Okay, so moving on to the next slide, and they're doing it cost effectively. The orange bar chart shows that the electric energy utilities are paying roughly 38 cents a kilowatt hour for those water conservation versus energy savings. And so that's what they're paying per kilowatt hour for the energy saved. But the water conservation programs were saving energy at only 10 cents a kilowatt hour. So these are really interesting results that show that the water utility world is actually a much bigger player in the energy world than anyone really expected. So NRW is one of those ways, and that stands for non-revenue water. That's one of those ways that energy can be saved in a water utility system, because there's so much embedded energy in water because of the pumping and treatment and pressurization. If you're a utility that leaks a large amount of treated water out of your distribution system, you're not only losing money for that treated water, but you're losing valuable energy. And so the California Public Utilities Commission decided to take a look at that and to try and quantify what that savings might be. So they launched a $10 million pilot study from 2007 to 2009, and they took a look at 9 pilot programs that were jointly conducted between water and electric utilities to determine how much energy could be saved in what we call cold water conservation programs. So this is water that's saved that is not heated, say a shower or clothes washer. It's instead water that's just delivered like to your toilet or to the house. It's just counting the energy that is in that delivery process. And so they wanted to determine what the potential for long-term energy savings would be if those water efficiency programs were adopted on a more widespread basis. And so what they found, much to everybody's surprise, was that the results showed that of the 9 pilot programs, the pilots with the highest energy savings were distribution system leak detection and pressure management and low-income, high-efficiency toilets. So the distribution system leak detection pilot was run by Southern California Edison in 3 demonstration communities. And the results showed that this pilot program appeared to offer the greatest energy savings potential at relatively low cost out of the other 9 pilot programs. So this was important information, and the data that that study provided is very valuable into this discussion, because what they determined was the recoverable leakage economically for the 3 demonstration communities ranged from 60 to 116 million gallons per year of water saved, but the total embedded energy saved in those systems from the repaired leaks was 178,000 roughly kilowatt hours. And the total potential energy that could be saved with proactive leak detection and pressure management in the 3 communities was as high as 583,000 kilowatt hours. So these are not small numbers. So what does this mean for you as a water utility? You need to compute what your embedded energy numbers are for your pumping and treatment types, as well as for each one of your water supply sources to see where there's variation. Groundwater that's pumped is going to be different than surface water that's delivered. If surface water is pumped up large elevations, that's going to have a high embedded energy value. But once you've figured out what all that is, and what your values are, efficiency programs can be designed to optimize your utility operations and to minimize the amount of energy that's needed for the highest energy using supply source. And so as a result, water savings and greenhouse gas emission reductions, these are all byproducts of better NRW management. And this leads me into a solution that's one way to capture this, and that's the NPRV that we're going to talk to you about in the rest of this webinar. And it's a terrific turnkey real-time sensor-based modular system, and it'll integrate well with existing utility pressure management programs. And so at this point, I'm just going to finish by showing you a last slide that I'm sure Greg will want to talk about, which is the dashboard that shows in the NPRV what energy is being saved, as well as how the pressure is being managed. It's time for me to stop and to turn it over to the good stuff of this webinar, which is the panel of utility managers who have already had experience with this product. So Greg, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks, Marianne. That was really scary. It seems like the water industry has some major headwinds that it needs to address with these unpredictable climate disruption. I was really the amount of drought that's going on in the United States is really shocking, and I'm sure it represents the rest of the world as well. So clearly we need to think differently to tackle these systemic changes. So thanks very much. That was very insightful.